Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SimNFL show. Real talk about fake sports. I am your host and commissioner. You can call me Pierce. Today, we are covering all the action from Week 10 of the Pro Sim over at SimSN. If you're unfamiliar, come check us out on the website and on Discord. We would love to have you. As always, we're going to start today's show with our stats and summaries from all of the Week 10 action. Then we will finish with my choices for the players of the week. We'll do a quick injury update, look at the NFL standings. We'll also take a look at the current draft order and where that sits at this point in the season. And then our feature today is a revisiting of the Stock Watch segment from all the way back in Week 2. We're going to look at my selections post Week 2, buying, selling, and holding, see how well I predicted the immediate futures for those teams. And then, of course, we will end with a preview of the games to come next week. So, let's dive right in. It was a tight contest on Thursday night between the Falcons and the Lions, with the Falcons ultimately coming out ahead in this one. After an early Detroit field goal, Jose Padilla used his legs to set up Atlanta's first touchdown. He broke off a 50-yard run, set up Michael Fulmer for a 9-yard touchdown, giving the Falcons their first lead of the game. It would stay that way until the third quarter, when Hansen found Victor Villamar for a 30-yard gain, which led to a Tanner Lake 18-yard touchdown run. The Giants would add a 2-point conversion to go up 14-7. It was then 14-10 later on in the third. Atlanta drove to the Detroit 34, but a Jose Padilla interception ended that drive. But then 4 plays later, it was Hansen's turn to get intercepted by Gregory Williams. This let Atlanta drive all the way down to the Detroit 7-yard line, where they got a field goal to make it a 1-point game. And then with 6:44 left in the fourth quarter, Falcons got the ball back and made a pivotal drive, 63 yards in 14 plays, which set them up with a 23-yard field goal with just about a minute and a half to go, giving them the 16-14 lead. Detroit would advance to their own 45-yard line before time expired, and the Falcons escaped with the victory. Michael Fulmer with a big day, 190 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Randall Hansen, 185 yards and a pick for the Lions as the Falcons win this close game. The highly anticipated game between the Commanders and the Rams in the NFC started off actually with a defensive battle. It was 3-3 until late in the first half when Morrison found Covarrubias for a 27-yard touchdown with under a minute to go in the half for the first touchdown. Both offenses came alive in the second half. In the third quarter, it was Covarrubias again, this time with a great punt return, setting Washington up at the Rams' 34-yard line. 6 plays later, Morrison found Gonzalez for a 9-yard touchdown and made the lead 17-3. A couple plays later, Philip Avila was intercepted by linebacker Pierre Smith, and it took Morrison just 1 play to tack on another touchdown, this time finding tight end Randy Wright for the 26-yard score. That made it 24-3. Rams would start clawing their way back late in the third quarter, Avila finding Scott Baldwin for a 31-yard touchdown, adding a 2-point conversion to Bruce Dawson to make it 24-11. But then Washington kept up the pressure. In the fourth quarter, a 24-yard Stephen Tabbert run, and then a catch for 33 on the same drive set himself up for his own TD, rushing it in from 4 yards out. That made it 31-11, 20-point lead. Rams would miss a field goal on the next drive, and the Commanders would be able to pretty much coast from there. Morrison, 358 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions for him. Avila, 408 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 5 interceptions. So big plays all around, offensively, defensively, and on special teams. Commanders ultimately coming out with the final score there being 38-25. Also in the early slot, had a great game between the Bills and the Vikings. Asensio started off hot, found Jan Summers, his tight end, for a 29-yard game on the game's first play. Bills would drive all the way to the Viking 2-yard line before being stopped and settling for a field goal. Three plays later, they would add to that lead when Earl Lewis picked Sinnock off and ran it in for a pick six, giving the Bills the early 10-0 advantage. Minnesota would get a great run from James Ibach on the next drive, 60 yards. That would set up a field goal for their first points. We were still in the first quarter. Asensio found Donald Kelly for a 52-yard bomb into the end zone. That made it 20-3 at that point. Sinnock would lead Minnesota back with long completions to George Boone for 18 yards and Jackie Evans for 39. That would lead to an Ibach touchdown from 8 yards out and 20-10. Minnesota would get the ball back, but Sinnock would throw an interception that would lead to a Buffalo field goal. And then Buffalo would add another field goal, a 50-yarder, as time expired in the first half, to enter the locker room up 26-10. Third quarter, Minnesota opened up by driving all the way to the Buffalo 6-yard line. But Sinnock threw his third interception of the game to kill that drive with no points. Later, Buffalo was forced to punt, but Chase Brown fumbled on the return for the Vikings, and Buffalo recovered, leading to yet another short field goal. That means it was a 29-10 lead at that point. It was 29-13 later in the third, when it was Asensio's turn to be picked off, this time by cornerback Barry Taylor. He returned it all the way to the 1-yard line. Vikings scored on the next play to make it 29-20. In the fourth quarter now, Minnesota drove 74 yards in 8 plays, the most complete drive of the game, leading to a Graterol touchdown run of 4 yards. So that brought it within 2 at 29-27. And Minnesota did get a stop and were able to get the ball back. They drove to the Buffalo 29-yard line, but on a critical third down, Steven DiNardo sacked Sinnock for a big loss. So Minnesota would punt the ball away with just over 4 minutes to go, passing up the 52-yard field goal. And then Buffalo would run off the rest of the clock. They would get 3 first downs, enabling them to run out the final 4 minutes and hold on just barely for the win. Donald Kelly had a great game for the Bills, 160 yards receiving and a touchdown. J.V. Axelrod, 10 tackles, 3 for a loss, including a sack. And then Earl Lewis with that great pick six. Also, for special teams shout-out, John Hollis Jefferson put 17 points up for the Bills. He was perfect on 7 kicks, all of them absolutely necessary as the Vikings got within 2, but could not cross that final threshold to win the game. Shout out to James Ibach, 132 yards rushing and a touchdown. Neil Henry, 6 tackles for loss, including 3 sacks for the Vikings. The Eagles and Giants fought in a divisional matchup that was one-sided for the first 3 quarters of the game. Starting off in the second quarter, Eagles put together an 80-yard drive in 11 plays, including a pool pass to Gilberto Silva for a 32-yard gain, and a critical 12-yard scramble by Poole on a 3rd and 8 to convert and keep the drive alive. Ultimately, Poole passed to Denzel Green for the 4-yard touchdown and the first points of the game. Giants promptly went 3 and out. Poole found Silva again for gains of 27 and 20 yards before running it in himself from 4 yards out, making it a 2-touchdown lead. Giants went 3 and out again, and the Eagles were back in business. This time, Aaron Poole found backup running back Lucas Mielik for a 40-yard touchdown pass down the sidelines and a 21-0 lead. In the third quarter, after the Giants finally got on board with a field goal, Philadelphia drove 57 plays on a 13-yard drive, including an Aaron Poole conversion on a 4th and 1 run. Ultimately, this drive ended in a Rashawn Alsadek 2-yard touchdown run. Next drive, Wilfredo Joseph threw an interception that was returned all the way to the Giants' 15-yard line. 2 plays later, Alsadek had his second rushing touchdown of the game. That made it 35-3 just in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, though, with the backups in, Wilfredo Joseph found Glenn Lloyd for a 7-yard touchdown. The defense forced a 3-and-out, and then the Giants put together a 12-play drive where Joseph found Lloyd again, this time from 5 yards out. So very quickly, it was 35-17, still in favor of the Eagles. Then backup Eagles quarterback Benjamin Wen threw an interception that led to a Giants field goal. Made it 35-20, but only 4 minutes were left at that point. So even though the Eagles went 3-and-out again, the Giants had limited time. And in fact, it was in the final seconds that Wilfredo Joseph hit Paul Canna for a 50-yard bomb as time expired. Would have been a dramatic finish, except the Giants still lost by 8. So they scored 4 times on the Eagles' backups in the final quarter, but the Eagles were still able to walk away with the victory. 35-27 was the final there. 154 yards for Gilberto Silva on a great day for him. Jonathan Perez, 115 yards rushing and another 38 receiving for the Giants. And Glenn Lloyd, a big day for him with those 2 touchdown catches. It was nearly an upset special with the Panthers playing the Saints. Saints leading for much of the game before falling to the Panthers 24-19. New Orleans scored on their first drive with Landrum starting out with the hot hand, hitting Gregory Sprouse for a 22-yard gain. Tight end Andres Smith for 16, and then Milton Evans for 12, and then a 31-yard touchdown. Carolina got a field goal on their first drive, making it 7-3. Later in the first, New Orleans had a 68-yard run by Josh Bassett, wiped out, unfortunately, by an illegal use of hands penalty on the offensive line. So they had to do it the hard way, but they did. 11 plays later, Evans found the end zone, again, this time on a 6-yard run, and the Saints had the early 14-3 lead. Later in the second quarter, they pinned the Panthers back deep in their own territory on a punt. And then Link was sacked in consecutive plays by Brett McPhail, leading to a safety and a 16-3 lead for the Saints. Link would ultimately be sacked 6 times in this game, 3 each from Brett McPhail and defensive end Eric Schaefer. But Carolina came back in the second half. They started with a 13-play, 72-yard drive, ending with Lynx finding Russell Barnes, a 5-yard touchdown, making it just a 1-score game. Then the Saints would drive all the way down to the Carolina 1-yard line, but a pair of incompletions and a 5-yard loss on a run meant they had to settle for a field goal. Later in the third, Pablo Jovel pulled off a great play with a pick-6 of Landrum, leading to a 19-17 score at that point. And then the defenses took over, and in the fourth quarter, a second Landrum interception was returned all the way to the Saints' 16-yard line. 2 plays later, Link found tight end Don Scott for a 5-yard touchdown and a 24-19 lead. Still 8 minutes left on the clock at that point, but the Saints' 2 final drives were a 3-yard gain, 3 yards gained in 3 plays and a punt. And then on their last drive, they actually lost 11 yards with 3 consecutive negative plays before punting, and the Panthers were able to hold on and complete the come-from-behind victory. 24-19 was the final. Dakota Link with a pair of touchdowns. And again, Pablo Jovel with the big pick-6 to switch the momentum in that game. Milton Evans had 135 total yards from scrimmage and a pair of touchdowns. And again, McPhail and Schaefer excellent with those 6 sacks and a safety between them. Ultimately, it was still the Panthers' day. 24-19 again, the final there. Titans and Jaguars had a close defensive struggle to close out the Sunday games. Matt Howard had an early interception in the first quarter that led to a Titans field goal attempt from 50 yards out, but they missed that. Later, Jacksonville would drive down to the Tennessee 37, but would punt on a 4th and 7, so still no points. It wasn't until the second quarter when Jacksonville called the perfect play against the Titans all-out blitz, a screen to Ryan Peterson, who took it 57 yards to the house. In the third quarter, Jacksonville was leading 7-6 when Tennessee fumbled on their own 23-yard line, giving the Jaguars a field goal. They were still up 10-6 with just 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Jacksonville was facing a 3rd and 19 from their own 31-yard line. Tennessee trying to get a stop to then get the ball back and go for the win. But Howard found Ryan Peterson for a 19-yard gain, just enough to convert for the first down. Jacksonville would finish that drive with a field goal, running the clock down to about 2:41. So the Titans got the ball back at the end of the game, needing a touchdown to tie it. They did gain 3 first downs, but they ran out of time with the ball on the Jacksonville 32-yard line. So the Titans fell just short, and the Jaguars were able to hold on for the win. Wayne Reimer held to 79 yards passing in this game. Jose Sola had a great game for the Titans, 7.5 tackles for loss and a sack. But Peterson, the real star of this one, 75 yards rushing, 82 yards, and that critical touchdown receiving, leading the Jaguars to victory. As for the rest of the Week 10 scoreboard, Rashard Ward had 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns for New England as they blanked the Jets 20-0. Jets were held to just 41 net passing yards and 145 total yards on the day. Cleveland handled Cincinnati in the Battle of Ohio 37-6. Juan Moore ran the ball 30 times for 170 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Dallas defeated the Chargers 38-21. Jesse Knoll was a perfect 11 for 11 in this game with 229 passing yards. He also added 101 rushing yards as well. James Carter was fantastic for the Chargers, 198 yards and a touchdown. In total, there were 4 100-yard rushers in this game, and the teams combined for 687 total rushing yards, all inclusive. Tampa Bay fell to the Kansas City Chiefs 31-14. Valenzuela was 19 of 31, 329 yards and a pair of touchdowns. For the Buccaneers, Max Smith and Gregory Taphorn combined for 283 rushing yards on 53 carries. But ultimately, it was the Chiefs' day there. Dean Hammonds was fantastic for Miami as they beat Chicago by 18 points. Hammonds was 27 of 35, 381 yards, and a trio of touchdown passes. Gary Freitag had 204 yards passing and 114 yards rushing, leading the Indianapolis Colts past Seattle 20-10. Indianapolis defense did their part as well, intercepting Jeremiah West 4 times. Houston blanked San Francisco 23-0. Ryan Johnson 22 carries, 256 rushing yards, and a pair of touchdowns. Travis Neebel added another 160 yards on the ground for the Texans as well. And then Denver used a great team rushing approach to beat the Raiders 41-13. Denver had 5 different rushers get between 50 and 70 rushing yards. And they also combined for 4 total rushing touchdowns. So no one above 70 yards, but a great team rushing attack for Denver on the day. So that leads me to my choices for Players of the Week. Again, great day for Dean Hammonds, 381 yards and a trio of touchdowns. Juan Moore for the Browns had an impressive day, 170 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also added 69 receiving yards as well. Ryan Johnson, 256 yards and a pair of rushing touchdowns for him. And then tight end Kerry Slomba for the Rams had a fantastic day, 16 catches, 171 yards and a pair of touchdowns. On the defensive side, Brett McPhail with those 3 sacks and a safety for the Saints. Jose Sola, 7.5 tackles for loss Neil Henry, 6 tackles for loss and 3 sacks for the Vikings. William Stevens, great day for Washington, defending a pass and a pair of interceptions. And then John Hollis Jefferson helping to win the game for the Bills. 7 of 7 on kicks for a total of 17 crucial points for the Bills in that victory over the Vikings. So congratulations to all these players being named my Players of the Week. So as for the injury report, here is where we are looking after this week's action. The new names to note here, John Rockhill of the Vegas Raiders. Sprained foot, will be out considerable amount of time there, 5 weeks. Randy Espino having a fantastic season for the Commanders, but he will miss next week with a strained back. Andres Garcia finds himself on the injured report again, this time with a pulled groin. Will leave him out another couple of weeks. And then Todd Brumlow is the other miss. He will miss most of the rest of the regular season for the Falcons with a triceps tear. So with all that said, here are the standings for the AFC. Dolphins still reigning supreme, undefeated at 9-0 in the East. In the South, it's the exact opposite. It's a complete wide open field. All 4 teams 500 or better, all within a single game of each other. A lot of great football left to be played in the South. It is absolutely anyone's division to win. Browns still hold a 2-game lead in the North over the Steelers at 4-6, an extra half game over the Bengals. Meanwhile, Denver still on top in the AFC West at 8-2, a couple of games ahead of the Raiders, and now with that head-to-head tiebreaker, Chargers still in a strong position there at 5-4. On the NFC side of things, still 3 strong leads for the Commanders, Packers, and Rams in their respective divisions. Rams could even have a clinching scenario in a couple of weeks. South is still very close. It's between the Panthers and the Falcons. Just a single game separating those 2 teams. So it's the top 5 in the NFC. And after that, currently competing for playoff spots are the Cowboys and Eagles at 5-5, and then the Seahawks just a half game behind them. And here is what the current draft order looks like. Only draft tiebreaker is strength of schedule, so I've included that there as well. You can see the 49ers, currently the owners of the number 1 pick, tied with New Orleans, who traded their pick to Detroit. So Detroit would be at number 2. And then with 1 fewer loss, we have the Jets behind them, and then New England at 2-7. A couple of 3-7 teams in Minnesota and the Giants. And then 7 through 12 is all tied up and all tiebreakers currently between a half dozen 3-6 teams. So a lot that could still shift here. A lot of movement could happen, especially in that second column. And we will keep tracking this through the end of the season. So, for our special segment tonight, as I said, we are revisiting my Stock Watch segment from all the way back in the Week 2 SimNFL show. Now, I know that in the real world, a lot of punditry is based on hot takes and big reactions and controversies and getting those clicks, but I always try to shoot straight, and part of that is holding myself accountable. So we're going to look back at my segment, see where these teams have gone, and if I guessed right or not. Now, when I first made this segment, I was looking maybe 4 or 5 weeks ahead, certainly not this far into the season, but whatever. We're going to take a look and see how these teams have done. So the very first, going from left to right here, I had a buy grade on the Colts. I liked what they had doing. And so far, that seems to have played out. They're 5-2 since I made that prediction. They're a half game out of first place in their division. And their only losses, those 2, are to Miami and the Los Angeles Rams. So Colts have been playing fantastic, and I think I absolutely nailed this first one. It's a little bit less clear with the Cardinals. They are 2-5 since I gave them a buy order. But I have to say, in my own defense, they had those terrible last-second losses to both Houston and Jacksonville. So the Cardinals are 2 blown leads away from having a winning record. So I'm giving myself a middling grade on this, because you can't judge based on what almost happened. You have to go by what did happen. So I think my assessment was pretty fair, and still at 3-6, the Cardinals are much stronger than they were last year. But maybe bye is a bit of a tall order. I had a middling bye grade on the Giants. They had just had 2 come from behind victories, and I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Completely missed that one, being optimistic on the Giants. They have gone 1-7 ever since. Their only victory was another come from behind victory against the 49ers, who are themselves 1-9. The Giants also have a whole bunch of games that look close because they scored right at the end of the game, and that reduced the margin. So the Cleveland game where they lost by 2, the Arizona lost by 6, and the Philadelphia game that we just reviewed where they lost by 8. All of those were essentially 2-score games where the Giants got a touchdown right at the end to make it look close. But they have gone 1-7 since I gave them that grade. Absolutely bad call on my part. The Chiefs went 2-5 since I gave them a low bye order. They came in big with an upset win over the Chargers, but then had big losses to Baltimore by 28. They lost to Pittsburgh by 24. They lost to Houston by 10. So can't really give myself too much credit for that call. 2 wins in the last 7 games for the Chiefs. I had a hold on the Seahawks. They had looked pretty good. They were about to play the Cowboys, and so I thought they might lose that game, but then they could go on a tear. And in fact, they did. They put up a great fight against the Cowboys, only lost by 3 points. And then they followed up with wins against Detroit, San Francisco, Arizona, Tennessee. So not the hardest strength of schedule, but certainly an improvement. They've won more than they've lost since I gave them that hold order. So lost to the Cowboys and then won 4 of their next 6. So feeling pretty good about that call. With Vegas, they won the game I was concerned about for them, beating the Browns. Then they turned around, lost to the Chiefs. But they also beat the Jaguars, the Saints, and the Vegas Raiders. So again, things didn't necessarily go quite as I thought early, but they did have an early loss followed by a sequence of wins, which is what I said would happen. So giving myself credit for that one. Unfortunately, pretty much from this point out, it all falls apart for me. The Vikings, I said, would be in a tough spot without Sinek, but I thought they would bounce back when he came back. So I was basically saying sell, but if you want to hold, you might be rewarded afterward. And sort of that happened. They went 0-4 without Sinek. But then they got healthy, and they lost to Houston and Buffalo, and almost lost to Chicago, but had a miracle comeback finish in that one. So since I made this prediction, they're 2-6. So giving myself credit for saying that they would probably struggle, but downgrading myself for saying, well, but then it might come back up when Sinek returns. They've still struggled, and so middling grade at best for me on that one. With Tampa Bay, I was low on them, but I did note that they were just a week away from having defeated the Cowboys in the very first game of the season. So I thought some people might have some residual desire to hold, but I was a bit pessimistic, and that ended up being the correct call. They've gone 2-5 since I put them there, and they have yet to score more than 19 points in any of those games. So that first game against the Cowboys opening the season looks more and more like an aberration as we go through the season. But now it gets really bad. I was a big sell on the Bengals. Bengals have gone 4-4 since I made that prediction. They beat the Raiders by 1. They beat the Ravens in overtime, beat Dallas by 24, and then had a wild game against the Eagles where they were losing for 3.5 quarters and then came back and won that one as well. So definitely not justified in my grade, although they definitely got some lucky bounces and some big breaks with some very close wins. So maybe there's another universe where they go 1-7, and I am vindicated. But that is not what happened in our universe. And then finally, I called Buffalo. I said they were done, should be looking ahead to the draft. And then they went 4-3 since I said that. They did get crushed by the Dolphins and the Steelers, so it looked like I knew what I was talking about. But then they beat New England. They had that huge upset victory against the Packers on Thursday night and followed that up with wins against the Jets and the Vikings. So definitely not justified in my sell order there, and they made me look foolish. So altogether, with 4 hits, 4 misses, and 2 in the middle, if you bet entirely according with my recommendations, you probably broke even. That's the way it goes sometimes. But again, I like to look back and hold myself accountable and see if the things that I said 8 weeks ago made any sense at all. And I got some of them right, and I was close on some, and a couple I completely missed. But those are the chances you take. So, looking ahead to next week, we start things off on Thursday night with Green Bay coming in at 7-2, visiting the Patriots in New England. Sunday, we start things off with Miami at Buffalo, a chance for Miami to build on that big divisional lead. A victory over Buffalo would give them a 5-game lead plus the tiebreaker, so almost effectively a 6-game lead, and we'd get very close to talking about clinching scenarios going forward. Washington is going to be at Pittsburgh in another early game. Then in the afternoon, we move to Cleveland being at Las Vegas, two winning AFC teams fighting for playoff positioning. And then a huge game in the afternoon, Philadelphia at Dallas, 2 teams 5-5 in the East, fighting for divisional ranking, fighting for pride, fighting for playoffs. A bunch on the line, which should be a very good game. The primetime game for Sunday night is the Rams at Arizona. And then we finish things off on Monday night with the Chicago Bears going to Tampa Bay to face off against the Buccaneers. Exciting games all around. Hope you will stay tuned and join us for those. But that is everything I have for this week's show. Thank you so much for stopping by. And as I say to all users in all of our sims, good luck and have fun.